Okay, so we're back from having shot 4 render out, and let's take a look at the end result. So that's not bad at all. It's a very short shot, but for the most part, at least up until where we're going to need it, that works out really nicely. So the rest of this video is really going to pose as a bonus video. At this point in the real world, we'd actually pretty much be done. We take all of our rendered shots into an external editing package and edit them together. However, so that we can keep all of this within Houdini, we're going to go ahead and show a technique where we can use some of the parameters on our file cop to edit our final piece together. So let's close out mplay. I'm going to jump up and create a new image network, and this will be our final image network, which I'll name to Final Edit. And if we jump down inside, we're going to bring in our 4 rendered out shots. So I'm going to push backtick to bring up the browser, jump into our renders folder, into shot 1, into the final folder, and grab the shot 1 final comp. And then I'll Control-C, Control-V to duplicate this, bring in shot 2's final comp. Control-C, Control-V to duplicate, bring in shot 3's final comp, and finally Control-C, Control-V to duplicate and bring in shot 4's final comp. Now the way we're going to edit this together, we're going to have shot 1 cut to shot 2, cut to shot 3, cut to shot 4, and then cut back to shot 3. So I'm going to Control-C, Control-V shot 3 once more so that we can cut from shot 3 to shot 4 and back to shot 3. Now the way we're going to get this set up, we're going to take advantage of overriding the frame range on all of our file cops and setting our shift to start frame, file range start, and file range length parameters so that we can create effectively clips out of each of our shots. So let's start with shot 1. And we've got shot 1 here starting on the first frame. Now because we're overlapping frames, we're probably going to need to extend our time range a small amount. So I'm going to boost that up to 700 frames. So let's bring up our global animations options. Set that end frame to 700. No, we don't want to stretch channels. Fantastic. So 700 frames should work out perfectly for us. So I'm happy with shot 1 for now. I'm going to wire shot 1 into a layer cop because we're going to use a layer cop to bring all of our shots together. And as long as we set each shot to only exist within its own time frame and not to have any frames that overlap any of our other shots, when we wire them into the layer, neither of the shots are going to interfere with each other because we'll only ever have one shot active at any one frame. So I'm going to start out by wiring shot 1 into the layer, and let's wire shot 2 into the layer and see what happens when we look through our layer. So I'm going to scrub, and we know that shot 1 exists for the first 200 odd frames. And as we start getting towards the end, shot 2 begins at frame 219, shot 1 doesn't finish until frame 220. So for frame 219 and 220, we've got an overlap. So we've got both shot 2 and shot 1 existing at the same time. So we can see shot 2 layered over shot 1. It kind of looks a bit crazy. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set shot 1 to end at frame 219, so we don't have this extra frame on the end. And I'm going to set shot 2 to begin at frame 220, so we don't have this first frame overlapping shot 1. How do we go about doing that? I'm going to jump to the file cop for shot 1 and override the frame range and tell it that the file range length, instead of being the full 220 frames, is now going to be 219 frames, and that's going to trim that final frame from shot 1. We still need to deal with this first frame of shot 2, and to do that, I'm going to jump into shot 2, override its frame range, and if we're back on the layer, if we're starting on frame 219, we're going to see shot 2 on frame 219. I want to offset that by 1 frame, so I want to shift it so that it doesn't begin until frame 220. We're still starting with frame 219 of the rendered output, which means we're still starting with this being our first frame. But instead of it starting in our actual time at 219, it's starting in actual time of 220. So now we have a clean cut between shot 1 and shot 2. So we're going to play for shot 2. And I want to cut shot 2 a few frames after our ball has left the frame. So I probably want to trim just a couple of frames from the end of shot 2. So I'm going to change our file range length, which says how many frames of that file do we actually want to have played back. I only want 80 played back as opposed to 82, so I've trimmed the last 2 frames from our animation. So now the last 2 frames have been trimmed, and we can see that we need to set shot 3 to begin at frame 300. So I'm going to wire shot 3 into our layer, and currently that's going to start partway through shot 3. I'm going to override the frame range, and instead of starting at 265, I want to start at frame 300. And that's going to push our start of the animation to this frame. So from frame 300 onwards, we're going to see shot 3. And instead of playing shot 3 all the way to the end, I want to cut shot 3 to shot 4 partway through the bull's jump. So I'm going to take from our file range length, and I'm going to drop that down from 386. I want to trim about 30 frames or so. So I'll try something like 360. That's maybe a frame too far. Let's try frame 359. Yeah, that works great. So around where the ball is halfway down the jump, we're now going to cut to shot 4. We're going to make use of the end of this shot when we cut back from shot 4 to show the end. So right about here, I'm happy with the end of shot 3. So now we can wire in shot 4. And shot 4 is already begun and finished with, because shot 4 goes from frame 613 up to frame 650, so we need to offset that. So I'm going to override the frame range, and I'm going to shift the start frame to 659. So what was originally frame 613, the first frame of shot 4, now starts on frame 659. So from 659 onwards, shot 4 is going to commence. But I don't want to play shot 4 all the way to the end. I want to cut back to shot 3 before the end, probably around this frame, so probably chopping a good 20 frames or so off. Let's try 18. That's 1 frame too much, so let's try 17. That's fantastic. So we're going to set the file range length to only use 17 frames of the animation. And for the end, the last 25 frames of our animation, we're going to use the shot 3. So let's bring shot 3 back in. And I'm going to override the frame range and tell shot 3 to start at frame 676. We're going to have a problem if we do this, because shot 3 is literally going to start at frame 676. We don't want to start with frame 265 at this shot. We want to chop off the beginning 300 or so frames. So we need to shift the file range start up until the point where we wish to cut back into our animation. So we do want to cut on frame 676, but not to frame 265 as shot 3. So I'm going to increase this. Let's try 650. 650 is a little too far. Let's try 620. Not quite far enough. 625. Nearly there. Maybe 626. Yeah, that works. So we're going to cut back to shot 3 when the ball is about halfway between the ladder and the pool. And that's going to allow us to play out the rest of shot 3 until frame 700. So now if we were to scrub, we're going to see all of our cuts take place. So what we can do, we can wire our layer into a ROP file output. So I'm going to wire this by right-clicking on the output into a ROP file output. And we can set up our frame range to go from frame 1 through to frame 700. And I want to set our output picture to jump up, and inside our renders folder I'm going to create a new folder called final. Jump into final, and I'll call this final edit.$f3.pic and accept this. So now we can go ahead and we can click on the render button, and that's going to render out. We'll do that off camera, and we'll come back in the next video and take a look at our final edit. So thanks a lot, everyone.